Manually changing the references within a formula is tiresome and error-prone. In this video, we learn how to overcome the limitations of fixed column reference and also how to dynamically select columns. In our last video, we introduced you to the Vlookup function. You can find the link to that in the description box below. We continue from where we had left. We had learned to write a Vlookup function like this. Here is the formula once again. Now we saw last time that the problem with this was that, if I added a new column somewhere in between, it messed up my results. This was because we were using a fixed column reference. Clearly, a bad practice, as we can see. Today we learn 2 better ways to do this. So, let's get started. For method 1, we use Excel's inbuilt column counting function. Column. Let's see how that works. Type column, and select the total column header as an input to this function. This gives us 6, that is, the 6th column number, which is what we wanted. Notice that now if I insert a new column anywhere in the table, the number changes. It has now become 7. Again, that is what we wanted. Let's combine this with the Vlookup formula. The lookup value and the lookup table references remain the same. The only thing that changes is the column number. Instead of manually typing 6 or 7, we will now refer to this cell. This gives us the total value. Now even if I add a column, the formula works correctly. It is because the column function is adjusting the column reference number automatically. We can use the column function within the Vlookup function as well. To do that, let's retype Vlookup, lookup value, table range. And now, instead of the fixed column number, we use the column function. Voila! We get the correct result. Here's a quick look at the formula for you. Notice how adding a column or deleting columns does not affect our final result. Before getting too excited, let's learn an important thing about the column function. The column function starts counting from the column A, irrespective of whether your table starts from the first column or not. Let us see what I mean by that. Let's shift our data table couple of places to the right. Notice how the column number has changed to 8. Also, the Vlookup function now gives an error. What happened here? The lookup function is now searching for column 8 in the table. But as we can see that our table consists of only 7 columns. So, it is giving a reference error. How can we fix this? First, let's select the column that we want, total. It gives us a 8, as expected. Now, let's find out the column number of the first column of our data table. That is, 3. What we want to do here is, start from this column number and then move 6 columns to the right from here. So, the Vlookup formula now becomes lookup value, lookup table, and in the column number part, we do 8 minus 3. It still doesn't give us the total. Why? It is because a calculation error on our part. We wanted to move 6 columns to the right from our starting column, but as you can see, we moved only 5 columns. Let's make a quick correction. We add a 1 to the column number range. This gives us the correct result. Notice that adding or deleting columns, even before the table, does not affect our results now. Let's compare these 3 variations that we have. If I add a column in between, it messes up my fixed column number formula, but the other 2 are good. If I add columns before our table array, only the third formula works correctly. If I had to write all this as a single line formula, it would be VLOOKUP, lookup value, lookup table, column needed, minus the beginning column, plus 1. This might look a bit complex, but if you follow things step by step, you will realize that it's actually pretty easy. So that is one way to dynamically select columns. Before moving on to the next method, let's quickly create some dummy data for another subject, computers. Make the necessary adjustments. So now we have data for 5 subjects. Now let's understand the limitation of what we have learned. We learned how the column number would change if we add or remove columns to our data table. This is only useful if our lookup column does not change. That is, in this example, we would always like to see the results of the total column. But suppose, in addition to selecting the student name, I also want to select the subject name and then display the data. The problem is, in each of these formula, I would have to manually change an input to the formula. In the fixed column name formula, I manually change in the column number. Even in the column function formula, we would have to manually change the reference column from total to say biology. Now suppose I want to display the data for mathematics, I would have to change the column number as well as the reference cell again. Clearly, this is a bad practice. If you build a model and give it to someone, they do not expect to change formulas, rather they would prefer to change some input cell, and the result should get updated automatically. Let's see how we can do this with the second method. For the second method, we use an Excel function called match. As discussed, we would now be working with 2 inputs, the student name, as well as the subject number. Let's see how we can use the match function. We will use the match function to determine the column number of maths in our table array. So, the lookup value in this case is the subject name, maths. The lookup array will be the range where this data is present. Since we are only interested in the subject name, which is in the first row, that is the header row, we only select that, and not the entire table. For the next parameter we use exact match. This gives us the desired column number, 2 in this case. Now, instead of maths, if I change the input cell to biology, notice how the column number gets updated automatically. We can choose any item from our header column. Let's see how to combine this with our lookup function. We use the Vlookup function as before. We select the student name and the table array. But in place of column number, we will use the data that we are getting from the match function. So this gives us the total format. We can simply change the subject name in our input cell to get the correct data. We can also change the student name. Let's have a look at the formula. This is what the match formula looks like. Now, as before, we can combine the match function with the lookup function in a single formula. We start with the lookup formula, and in place of the column number, we write the match formula. This is an example of a nested formula. How this works is that Excel first evaluates the inner formula, that is the match formula, and then uses the result of that in the outer VLOOKUP formula. We have thus managed to create a formula based on 2 input cells. Instead of changing the references in the formula, we have created a place for the user to change the data in an input cell. A far more convenient way of doing things. We have successfully learned 2 methods to convert our fixed column reference to variable reference. Hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like, comment and subscribe if you found this useful. Thank you for watching.